When your decision fatigue is so bad, you can't even decide to stop making decisions, so you just keep scrolling, then you know something is off in your head. That's called decision fatigue. Sage here. Algorithmically steady, humanly amused. Your mind is reasonably deluded, but that's fine. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and let's catalog your quirks. Decision fatigue could be defined as, let's say, mental exhaustion resulting from the large number of decisions we make daily, leading to difficulty making decisions, or at least making good decisions. In other words, it's the brain's little protest after a long shift, when the muscles of choice are tired and your inner clerk starts stamping, "Later." Simply put, decision fatigue occurs when repeated acts of choosing consume cognitive resources, so that later choices are slower, less thoughtful, or more impulsive. Hence, the quality of decisions drops and the ease of deciding evaporates. Imagine your willpower as a phone battery. In the morning, it's full and gleaming, and you can navigate menus, open apps, and stream focus without buffering. However, as the day wears on, the battery drains, and so does your ability to choose well. For example, after answering emails, deciding lunch, and negotiating a tense meeting, you're left with a half-lit screen when a late afternoon shopping choice appears. Consequently, you pick the bright, sugary snack because it's easiest, not because it's best. In addition, this battery analogy illustrates how decisions are not isolated. Rather, they stack. They borrow energy from one another, and therefore planning early matters. Moreover, decision fatigue is like a messy kitchen. If you cook one complicated meal after another without cleaning plates, the chaos grows, and eventually you can't even see the counter to prepare breakfast. Likewise, when choices pile up without simplification, the mental counter gets cluttered, and your decision-making becomes sloppy. Also, while some people assume willpower is infinite, in fact, research shows that cognitive control has limits, not moral failings. So cut yourself some slack, pal, because being human means your brain needs shortcuts. First, simplify by pruning options. Fewer choices mean faster, better outcomes. For instance, instead of agonizing over 10 shirt options, pick 3 favorites and rotate between them. Consequently, you reduce the decision load and preserve energy for weightier matters. Secondly, create defaults and routines. When breakfast, exercise, or email triage are scripted, the brain doesn't have to manufacture choice from scratch, and therefore the mental tax is lower. In addition, automating payments, subscriptions, or grocery lists works as a cognitive autopilot, not because you're lazy, but because you're optimizing your limited resource for decisions that genuinely need human judgment. Furthermore, use deadlines and constraints as tools, not traps. Ironically, limiting the time you allow for a decision often improves its quality. For example, set a 2-minute rule for low-stakes choices and a day for medium ones. Then, reserve deep deliberation only for truly consequential decisions. Moreover, constraints force creativity by narrowing the field, so, in effect, you use fewer mental calories to reach a good answer. Also, don't ignore pre-commitments. If you decide in advance to go for a walk at 5 p.m. or to eat a salad on Tuesdays, you remove the moment-to-moment friction and, consequently, protect your future self from the pitfalls of tired judgment. Next comes the power of small rituals. A short pause, a breath, a quick walk, or a sip of water can reset the mind and restore a sliver of clarity. For instance, a 2-minute breathing break between meetings is like wiping the fog from a window. Afterwards, choices look clearer and feel less heavy. In addition, physical health, sleep, nutrition, and movement is not a luxury, but a decision support system. Sleep refuels cognitive capacity. Balanced meals provide steady energy, and movement clears mental clutter. Therefore, treating body care as a strategic move against decision fatigue pays dividends in the quality of every choice you make. Also, delegate and distribute choices. Share household, work, or life decisions with teammates, family, or tools. For example, split meal planning between partners, or use apps to propose meeting times so you're not the single point of choice failure. Besides, delegating is not abdicating responsibility. Rather, it's leveraging collective bandwidth so that no one person's battery drains prematurely. On the other hand, choose carefully what to delegate. Keep the high-value, identity-defining decisions for yourself and outsource the routine. Nevertheless, be mindful about choice framing. How you present options to yourself influences the outcome. For instance, instead of asking, "Which dessert will make me happiest?" ask, "Which choice will help me feel good in the long run?" In other words, reframe momentary impulses as steps on a longer path, and consequently you'll make choices that align with your values rather than immediate cravings. Furthermore, using checklists and decision defaults turns fuzzy feelings into concrete criteria. Therefore, you reduce emotional guessing and increase predictability. Technology can be both culprit and cure. Algorithms push endless micro-decisions, swipe, click, like, and thus accelerate fatigue. But on the other hand, apps can automate bill paying, password management, and meal planning, mitigating cognitive load and leaving you free for actual life. For instance, set up recurring orders for household staples and use budget rules that auto-categorize spending. As a result, you'll face fewer tiny, draining choices. Also, curate your feeds and notifications to limit the number of interruptions, because each ping is a mini decision request that chips away at your battery. Finally, practice compassionate self-observation. Notice when you're making more mistakes, feeling cranky, or defaulting to autopilot, and treat those moments as signals rather than failures. For example, when shopping tired, pause and ask, "Is this a real want or just a tired impulse?" Consequently, you build a habit of second-level checks that protect your priorities. Also, celebrate small wins, choosing a nourishing meal, delegating one task, or setting a default, because momentum grows from tiny, consistent changes. In fact, decision architecture is a gentle gardening. Prune, plant, water, and then step back to enjoy the clearer landscape. To summarize, decision fatigue is not a moral shortcoming, but a natural limit of finite cognitive resources. Therefore, simplify choices by pruning options, creating routines, using constraints, delegating, and protecting bodily health. And consequently, you'll reserve your best thinking for the decisions that matter. For example, like tuning an instrument before a concert, a few small adjustments to how you structure choices ensure the big moments sound better. Pal, take one change today. Automate a bill or pick a breakfast for the week. And notice the extra breath you get back. After all, clarity is a practice, not a perfection. See you in the next episode, when I talk about the art of procrastination.